Your Town Matters is funded by the Government of Canada through the Local Journalism Initiative and supported by Cactus Media, Canada's independent community television association.
I'm Vicki Hogarth and welcome to Your Town Matters. I'm joined today on Grand Manan at the Village Council Chambers by the Mayor of Grand Manan, Bonnie Morse. Thank you for being here today, Bonnie. It's so nice to finally sit down with you in person on Grand Manan and not over Zoom as we've been doing throughout the pandemic.
It's great that you're here in person and to do this in person and not on Zoom finally.
Before you and I sat down today, CHCO came to the island in part to film and live stream the public meeting on the closure of Scotia Bank. That was organized by Greg Russell, who's a village councillor, but was actually hosting the meeting as a concerned citizen. Let's take a look.
If we do nothing, the bank will close. If we do something, it will more than likely close. If we do everything that is ethical and legal to put public pressure on Scotia Bank, it might stay open. And I'm saying might, not this might, but might. I believe that somewhere in that Scotia Bank tower in Toronto, there is an executive or a board member who, if they knew the whole story and the impact on us islanders, he or she would take the necessary action to reverse it. The more effective our protest, the sooner it will get to that office. I don't know which one it is, but that's where we're headed. There are two outcomes to our efforts. Scotia Bank reverses its decision and stays open, or it closes as planned. If it closes, a couple of things are going to happen. Thousands of our friends and businesses and government we deal with will know that Grand Mananers will not take these devastating decisions lying down. And two, Scotia Bank is going to have a very serious public relations problem.
CHCO has been on Grand Manan covering the public meeting about the closure of the island's only bank, Scotia Bank. There were almost 200 people at that public meeting, and since we live streamed it on our Facebook page, within 12 hours there were 8,000 views alone, and we expect those numbers to rise as word gets out about what's going on the island. But to see the community come together and united over this, trying to save the bank, shows how important it is to the community to do everything they can to try to save the bank, or at least have their voices heard. Why do you think trying everything they can to save the Scotia Bank is so important to people on the island?
I think for us, the pandemic in particular, we've lost several businesses, entities over the last couple of years. And so for the island, it's like one more blow to our economy, to our psyche as far as that goes. You know, the bank in particular, everybody needs a financial institution at some point in their life. And while a lot of us may have moved to electronic banking, there does come a point where whether you've lost your debit card, it doesn't work, or you need cash, and particularly for our seniors, I mean, they are still very much cash reliant, and they haven't made the transition. And for businesses here as well, you know, that are cash based, whether it's a convenience store, restaurant, hairdresser, whatever, to have to keep that amount of cash on hand it's obviously very concerning from a security point of view. And so I think everybody is just, you know, the Bank of Nova Scotia has been a mainstay on Grand Manan since it opened over 100 years ago, and it's almost inconceivable that we're going to wake up in the summer and they're not going to be here.
Banks that do exist in Canada are obviously protected to a certain extent by the federal government, MP John Williamson of New Brunswick Southwest has made this point in Parliament, has said that they do owe a service, especially to rural communities, given the protection that they have to not have other banks from the U.S., for example, coming in and competing to serve the people of Canada, especially in places like this where there is just the one bank. Is that a sentiment that you share?
And I think that that's part of the frustration that we have here is, I mean, Grand Manan, we're rural, we're remote, and we are isolated. For us, it's not just an inconvenience factor of having to drive another half hour down the road. It is literally an entire day to just go deposit your check or to replace your debit card or any of those basic things that people are, accustomed to just popping into the bank to do. And I think, it's one of the plights of rural, remote communities everywhere. Fogo Island is actually in the same boat that we are, the same ferry rides, same type of thing. But I think it is something that hopefully, government will take the chance to look at. And, I hope it's not too late for Grand Manan, but it likely is. But maybe there is some benefit for other communities from what is happening to us. And there is a way that maybe it can be prevented from happening to other communities.
Grand Manan is an island of about 2,400 people. But that being said, there's some pretty lucrative business here on the island. There's a lot of big fishing industry as well as internationally acclaimed tourism industry. So is it fair to say that the bank isn't necessarily losing money being open here on the island? It just might not be making as much as if it was in a bigger community.
I think that's probably a good scenario. Certainly we have a number of fishing businesses in particular. Scotia Bank had a policy change probably about 10 years ago that really impacted this community. They chose not to give loans to fishermen when they were buying licenses and boats. So if you can't get a loan for your business, you're going to take your business somewhere else. And by not recognizing the opportunity that there was here on the island for that kind of revenue stream that, fishing boat loans would have provided, they lost a lot of business here locally. And I think that that was one of the factors. So yeah, I think that they're probably, I'm not sure that they're losing money here. I just don't know that they're making enough money or as much money as they are in other locations. We haven't been told anything specifically from Scotia Bank. I think we've all made some speculation and some guesses on what's going on. The cost of doing business on Grand Manan is more than what it is other places. Just the transportation issues that we have to go to other places. It's the same thing if you're running a business here to get the armored cars, for example, to the island. There are costs associated with that are probably greater here than they are in some other places.
A point that you brought up that we were speaking about earlier before we started recording, which is that losing the institution, the bank, coupled with the fact that you've lost a dentist this year on the island, which is another reason why islanders have to now travel to the mainland for a service that they used to get here. A couple losing a dentist with now having to do banking on the mainland, and that creates a need for more trips over, which ultimately fills up more space on the ferry, meaning sometimes you can't necessarily even get on the ferry that you're trying to go over to the mainland on. This creates an issue ultimately for the province, who might now have to fund more ferry rides. You're used to just having more ferry rides in the summer season when the tourism season is busy, but this is something that ultimately the province should be considering too, that without a bank, they will probably need more trips to the mainland from Grand Manan to meet islanders' needs.
Absolutely. That's the reality of living on the island. There are only certain crossings on the ferry that you can take that would allow you to make a day trip to be able to do your business, to go to the dentist, the bank, whatever it is required to do. So we have bottlenecks on trips, the 7:30 a.m. departure from the island and the 5:30 back from Blacks Harbor. Those are the trips that people do when they're doing a day trip to the mainland. We've already started talking to the province because, we have the supplemental season, the end of June, July and August, and then into September. But really there are months when we could, right now, start having a supplemental crossing on the ferry up until December because it is such a bottleneck trying to get off the island and then get back on. And when you talk about the fishing and the aquaculture industry, those are both industries that require a lot of heavy tractor trailer type of traffic, whether you're talking salmon feed coming to the island or lobster leaving the island. Those vehicles take up a lot of space on the ferry. So we're really in a place where the ferry capacity is one of the bottlenecks that we have for the community. And as these businesses close, it's only going to get worse.
Selena, who is the owner of Sunrise Seafoods and the Sequel restaurant here on the island, spoke at the public meeting about the bank closure. And she made a point that I hadn't actually thought of, which is that if there isn't a bank on the island, it will be up to local businesses to protect or to keep safe their profits, their money, before heading to the mainland to make deposits and to do their banking. Is this a concern that you're hearing from many of the business people here, that this is another risk that losing the bank ultimately entails?
Absolutely, and that's been one of the big concerns that we've heard from businesses and from seniors as well, who are very cash dependent, that now people are going to know when you have an amount of cash potentially sitting on hand, and it does make people vulnerable. It makes them feel vulnerable. And it's a worry for the community, like how are we going to ensure that the people feel safe and that we are not looking at an increase in potential crime.
In southwest New Brunswick, we can obviously look to other communities to see how losing important institutions can impact a community. I'm thinking specifically right now about Campobello Island, that has lost a bank over the years, has lost a gas station, and things like that maybe don't necessarily convince islanders to leave the island, but definitely might deter someone from moving there. So as mayor, are you worried when, fine, a dentist has left, but you could easily replace a dentist, but when a bank leaves, there's not necessarily that idea that one will necessarily soon come and take its place. So I'm just wondering, as mayor, if you are concerned about how losing something like Scotia Bank, the island's only bank, could potentially impact the island's population over the years to come.
I think that's always a concern. I think it's a concern for anybody, as you see more urbanization across the province and across the country. Grand Manan, because of our location, particularly with our resource-based industries, I think there's always going to be a population base because of the difficulty in accessing those resources from a mainland port, for lack of a better word for it. And certainly the last census, Grand Manan actually saw a population increase. And I think for me, Grand Manan will always be a good place to live, and hopefully we can find ways that will make sure it's still a good place to do business as well.
And a great place to visit. I will point out, coming here in May, it was so great to hear. The first place I called to book was full. Bird season, I wasn't thinking. So definitely that will be, again though, an obstacle for tourists. I know Scotiabank, for me, when I travel to the US, I'm a Scotiabank customer, so I know if I go to Bank of America, I can just take out US dollars. I don't have to do it before I travel. So it will be another obstacle for the tourism industry. I don't think it necessarily will hurt tourism from coming here because it's so beautiful, but it definitely complicates travel.
I think it does. I think for businesses, particularly if you have out-of-country U.S., we certainly have a number of those of tourists from the U.S. coming here. So if you're coming with U.S. cash, it's one more obstacle barrier for businesses, for people who are trying to make exchanges, that sort of thing. So it's one more thing that people have to deal with, and just one more hurdle. We certainly hope it's not going to impact tourists. I think a lot of businesses are taking the opportunity to encourage people before they come to make their money exchange, all of those things. And, Grand Manan will always be a good place to visit in the summer.
And on the topic of tourism, the island does have some exciting events coming up. In June, you have the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebrations on the island. Can you tell me what events will be taking place here and what's to come for that?
One of our local citizens, Wade Reppert, had taken it upon himself. He approached council. We invited the Lieutenant Governor, so we're very excited that she's going to be on the island that weekend. think June 2nd to 4th are the dates that she's here. I'm going to visit the school, the farmers market, some of the local community groups. We're very excited that she will be stopping by, and I think, you know, given that it's Jubilee weekend, it's always exciting to have the Queen's representative visit the island. So we're really looking forward to that.
I don't want to say that we're living in a post-COVID world just yet, but there is some semblance of coming back to normal this summer in terms of events that we're used to celebrating and festivities that are going on. Can you tell me a little bit about what you have in store this summer on Grand Manan and what events that might be coming back this year that we haven't had in the last couple?
I think we're all really excited that we're finally getting back to our Canada Day celebrations. Canada Day on Grand Manan it's a really big deal for locals. We're starting to get some events organized. People are volunteering again with the events that they would normally run. For anybody who's been here on Canada Day, they know the Greasy Pole is a highlight, and word on the street is it's going to be back this year. So we're looking forward to just being able to do some of those events and activities that we have done in the past. So, you know, might look a little bit different post-COVID, but hopefully we'll be back to where we were 2019.
I know Southwest New Brunswick in particular is experiencing just this growth in tourism that I think a lot of New Brunswickers discovered Southwest New Brunswick, maybe from the north if they used to go to Maine. So you're hearing from local businesses that bookings are up, or are they anticipating a busy season?
I think that bookings are solid, if not, and there are some businesses that I know have booked or booked a lot of their dates through the summer, probably some spotty dates here and there. Grand Manan was very fortunate, like a lot of other places, that summer 2020, when we were really shut in, we did experience a real boom in local maritime visitors coming here. And I think a lot of them have decided to come back because, you know, the ferry I think is a little bit intimidating maybe for people at first, but it's really not as scary as it seems to be at times. So I think you know, you have the advantage of going to a remote island without having to go that far from home. And certainly with the price of gas, if it stays where it is, I think Grand Manan could continue to be a viable option for people in the Maritimes who maybe don't want to spend as much on gas but still want to get away somewhere. So we're really hoping it's going to be another good season here on the island.
That is a really great point, actually, with the price of gas. I think it will be changing a lot of plans too, last-minute plans.
Absolutely. I mean, Grand Manan is one of those places you could come here with a tank of gas and still have a little bit left in the tank when you go to get on the ferry. There's lots to do, but it is there's a limited amount of roads that you can drive on. So yeah, I think it is a good alternative for people who are maybe looking at that price and going, gee, I don't know if I want to drive for 2 days and spend that money on gas. I could spend it on something else.
There's also some infrastructure news that you have for the island that benefits both tourism in the summer as well as locals. You have a pool in the works.
We've had a pool on Grand Manan. It was actually a centennial project, so it opened in 1967. We closed it was closed during the pandemic, and we've been unable to reopen it. It needs some repairs. So we've been working with a consultant to look at essentially a major rehab. Our pool that we have now is longer than the standard length, so we are looking at basically just building a pool inside the pool basin that we have right now, making it a standard size pool so that if there is a swim team at the school or something like that, they'd be able to hold meets locally here. And obviously not going to be ready for summer of 2022, but hopefully by next summer we'll be in a place where we might be having a pool here again on the island.
Now, you've navigated your time as mayor through, in world history, one of the strangest times. What have been the challenges of that, just sitting with also a relatively new council?
Yeah, I was thinking about that this past week. We're just about a year into our term, so kind of thinking back on what has happened this year, and it has been unprecedented. I think for us, though, we don't really know any other way to do it. I mean, we came into it during a pandemic, so we've all had to get our feet under us during bizarre times at times. We've struggled a bit, you know, when we couldn't meet in person, going to Zoom. Some of those things I think were challenging, but I think I feel very fortunate every time we have a meeting that we have this group that we do have around here. It's a really great group of people. Grand Manan's not the most diverse society, but we do have a very diverse group, and we don't always agree, but we can disagree respectfully, and it's really great to have all those opinions. And I think I think that now that I feel like we have our feet under us, I'm hoping that you're going to see really exciting things from us in the next 4 years.
We were talking a little bit about this before we filmed. I was saying, being based in Southwest New Brunswick for CHCO, the pandemic, there has been a silver lining in that Zoom media streams from Fredericton have made our ability to connect as a news outlet with different corners of the province. Really at any time, at any minute, we can be anywhere. Have you found that had an advantage when you live on an island, not just for council meetings, but for people doing business? Technology, we've all pivoted really quickly, and it has changed our lives in rural communities quite significantly.
Absolutely. I mean, I used to travel a lot for my day job, and it's been, while I miss the travel, miss seeing the people, there are huge advantages to not being on the road all the time and being able to do a quick meeting and see people as opposed to doing it over a conference call. And for here, you know, at the Village Council too, we've had the opportunity to maybe have meetings a lot quicker, or, you know, be able to access different people that maybe doesn't require traveling to Fredericton or them traveling to Grand Manan. It makes it that much easier to, pop up a Zoom link or a Teams meeting and sit down and have a conversation for an hour, as opposed to taking, the 7:30 ferry off the island and being one more set of traffic that's clogging up the boat numbers.
Grand Manan is obviously, and I would say fortunately, not necessarily affected by the amalgamation that the rest of the province is going through right now. But that said, you are signing up as a council for basically a 5-year term, because it starts again afresh this fall when other communities are electing either entirely new councils or adding new councillors to the area that they are now representing that is growing in size. But is everyone on council in Grand Manan excited about this opportunity to serve a 5-year term, especially given that it is relatively a new council that was elected last year?
I think so. I think, because we're such a new council, really the first year, it's a learning curve. And I think now we do have our feet under us. We're feeling more like we know what we're doing, as much as you ever really do know what you're doing in municipal politics. But I think that we're really excited to have that extra year to be able to do some of the things some of the goals that we've set out for ourselves. Certainly, with the municipal reform, we were fortunate that we weren't touched by that. Grand Manan amalgamated ourselves back in '95, and we were used in a couple of the reports as an example of how amalgamation can work. And it wasn't always smooth here during those early years. I think, certainly learning to work together is always a challenge. But for us, I think it's been a really good thing for us that we are one community and that we are able to work together on things like the bank and the ferry and some of those other huge issues that are facing us, that we are able to do that together.
And on that topic of goals, what are some of the future goals that you have as a council that you'd like to see accomplished in the near future? We've
talked about the pool. That was a big one for us. Our transportation committee is looking at, extending the ferry schedule. The Grand Manan 5 is 32 years old this summer, so we're starting to have the conversation of, what does a replacement vessel, we need to start talking about that. We have an arts and culture committee. They're really excited. We have a festival they're planning for this summer, so we're looking forward to having that happen the first weekend in August. Some other maybe not as exciting or glamorous things, but we're revisiting our bylaws, just because after 25 years it's time to go back and say, do these things still make sense for us as a community, and what do we need to do? Our rural plan we had hoped to have done by now. Probably in the next few months we'll have that updated and passed. We have a new logo for the village, which we're really excited about. We'll have a new website out hopefully by the end of June. So a lot of smaller things that are helping us with our communication, and some bigger projects that are going on too. And you put me on the spot, and I'm sure I've forgotten some things, but those are some of the big ones off the top of my head.
Thank you so much, Bonnie, for sitting with me today and meeting with me at Village Council on Grand Manan. I hope to be back again soon.
Thank you for being here.
My guest today has been the Mayor of the Village of Grand Manan, Bonnie Morse. I'm Vicki Hogarth. Thank you for watching Your Town Matters.